Welcome to the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowden, where we unpack the strategies and solutions that make localization fast, scalable, and efficient. I'm your host, Stefan Huyghe. Good morning from Texas. Welcome to the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowden. I'm here this morning this afternoon, I should say for you guys, because you're in Germany, with Olli Gurtschmann and Felix Bartz from Wordcrafts. And before I butcher their careers and their background, I should just give them a chance to introduce themselves. So go ahead, guys. Olli and Felix.
Well, Stefan, thanks a lot for having us. We are really excited to be on that podcast. I'm Olli. I'm the co-founder of Wordcrafts together with Felix, and we've been colleagues, or let's say we've been studying together at university, technical translation, back in, that was 20 years ago now, roughly.
Yeah. Kind of.
It is 20. Oh my God, it's 20 years ago. Holy
I think we're all in that vicinity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad I still have a bit of hair, although it is receding, but never mind.
Bald is beautiful. Don't worry, you're in good company if you like bald here.
Yeah. We have been founding Wordcraft. So we are a translation agency, but we're not just a typical translation agency you find around the corner. We actually specialize on localizing apps for the Apple ecosystem. So we do everything macOS, iOS, iPadOS, and VisionOS now as well. And we've been doing that for, I think, 15 plus years now. So we started out in 2009 when Apple first introduced their developer SDK, allowing third-party developers to publish apps on the iPhone. And that's basically when we started.
I'm Felix. Hi, thanks for having me. Olli kind of wrapped it up quite perfectly. It wasn't like that we sat down and said, hey, we wanna build a company or something. It was like it fell into our laps, so to speak, because we were technical translators and we started our careers and we were presented with kind of Excel sheets with software strings, but nobody could tell us what it was and what it was for and where it came from. So and nobody cared at all. And then I started to write my German diploma thesis of translation studies about how to localize stuff on the iPhone. And the beauty of that work was that I had a list of sources, which was kind of, under a page long, because there was simply nothing. So I had to reverse engineer everything by myself and kind of become something like a junior developer just to find out how to localize stuff on the app or on the Apple ecosystem or even before iPhone. So I had to talk to developers, and then developers said, hey, now that you found out how it works, why don't you simply do this for us? And then the word spread, and this is how the company started. So it was more like a lucky opportunity to do this.
There's so many people that accidentally fell into localization that way. I'll tell you my story one day as well, but we're not going to talk about me. We're actually going to be talking about entrenched habits and overcoming them, and why linguist preferences are important in platforms. It's funny that you mentioned the Excel days. I remember the days where in my company, we were doing complex website localization projects with Excel spreadsheets, and the project managers would have to wait until somebody closed the Excel spreadsheet on one side of the floor in order to be able to work in the same project on the other side of the floor. And then we got crowd and just making our life a little bit easier. What do you think are the main challenges that arrive with transitioning platforms? That would be my first question. Who wants to go first?
Well, I can kind of start with that, and then maybe if I forget something important, Olli can take over. The thing is, like, as we are translators by by trade and have kind of falling into being project managers and company owners and stuff, we have quite a good view on kind of both sides of the constraints you have or the preferences you have. And the thing is, like, whenever you start getting used to a software tool you're using, you start to customize it a bit for you. Maybe you change, I don't know, keyboard shortcuts or the layout or whatever it is. And then somebody comes around, your client says, hey, we're going to introduce a new tool that obviously isn't the nicest thing for you to or the nicest situation for you to be in. But whenever the client or the party who kind of has the power over the tooling is really putting an effort and making it better also for you and not only for him, and offers some training and shows you the benefits of that, I think it's still a challenge because some people have to retrain and get used to it again. But as long as everybody benefits, I don't think there is much a challenge to do. It's more like a time effort you have to invest and then can benefit from it.
And I think it's actually, I think the issue is twofold as well. Well, first of all, we are humans, so we are entrenched in our habits. Yeah, we really don't like change by default. So anything that changes from the outside is a challenge for us humans anyway. Yeah, so that's something we have to overcome. You know, not only when it comes to linguistic tools, but to anything in life, basically. So that's the one thing. And the other thing is, of course, as a linguist, let's say you are a freelance linguist. Yeah, most translators are freelance linguists. Some work in other companies, but that applies as well. It's like there's the financial challenge. So as a translator, you need to make money, and you make your money by translating things. Like when you translate 300 to 500 words per hour with your familiar tool, that's fine. But if you have to get used to a new tool, a different tool, something that's really going to make you challenge in getting used to it, your productivity is going to drop like a lot. Yeah. So where's the bread coming from?
Yeah, it could cost you money to learn something. It actually has a financial repercussion.
That's the thing. So who's going to pay that money?
Yeah, I was going to ask you because obviously you guys are active in a real technical field of localization, and translators might be really good translators without having a lot of experience with some of these tools. What's your strategy of introducing innovation to your team without alienating them? Do you have any specific tips you can give people on how to implement?
We have been transitioning a lot.
Yes.
In the 15 years we've been in business. Like I haven't counted, but I guess it's like we've been using 4 or 5 different tools now within these 15 years. And it's always been a challenge. And we've always tried to select the tools that we thought our translators could get on with the best. So familiarity for our translators with the tools has always been a key factor in deciding on which tool to use. That's one thing, like from our LSP perspective. And what we actually found out is, especially when transitioning to Crowdin now as well, is we have, from our side, we have created an excessive tutorial set, video tutorial set for any translator who's onboarding, like coming new to our company as a freelance translator, and for any translator who's been with us for so many years, and with us during the transitioning to Crowdin as well. So we actually took our time, and like it took us like 3 working days at least alone just to create this. It was a 9-piece tutorial about how to get around in Crowdin and getting to know the interface and all the workarounds and how to customize Crowdin, keyboard shortcuts, and how to work with the editor and the QA stuff and all this.
I knew right away when I saw your microphone and headset setup this morning that you guys were involved in some kind of recording, because typically my guests don't have that kind of setup. So congratulations on that. Felix, you have something to add to Olli's?
Yeah, just like a little caveat. It's like whenever you work with whatever tool you're working with at the moment, there you will always get like questions from translators or other suppliers, like saying like, I really like the tool, but is there a way to improve this, or can I avoid falling into this trap, or whatever it is. And we're doing our best to support people, but sometimes it's like, no, it's the way it is, or that thing you want to do or you want to improve is simply not possible. So whenever we changed, we always try to remember and looked in our documentation, was like, what is translator X has been complaining about in the past, and if there's something and if in the transition there was an opportunity to point out, hey, you can do this now. You've been asking for this for years or for a very long time in the past, and this is how you can achieve this now. So there's always like putting some motivation into individual people by pointing out individual things, that there is something in them, or that there's something in the transition for them. It's not really like especially made for them, but they are lucky and they have a more motivation to embrace this change, because they already have been told that there's something exciting for them in it. So
we've talked a little bit about the challenges of implementing new tools. I'm also interested in knowing whether you have any success stories of implementations that maybe can teach us something. Do you have any examples of that?
You know what, we were just in the introduction, we were talking about how long we've been in business and what we've been experiencing back then 20 years ago. And I think all of us can remember the first TraDOS versions, when it was just a mere Word plugin, and you had these little colored boxes. I can't recall which colors they were.
You remember the dongles? There was dongles that you had to
plug
into the back of your back of your machine.
Exactly. And all you had was this Word plugin, with these colored boxes, and you had the text, like the source text up on top, and the target text you were going to translate on the bottom. And that's all you had, basically, with weird colors. Like, I'm colorblind. I can't even tell what colors they were. So, I don't know. And then I remember, like, in 2004, was it 2004? I can't recall. But at some point, SDL bought TraDOS. And they had this tool called SDLX. And it was a tool, like, at least in the circles I knew back then, that was just outright hated. Everyone hated SDLX. It was horrible, or regarded as horrible. I've worked with it. It did work, but it basically introduced the side-by-side view to translators the first time, and it stuck around, and that's something that really makes me think, that really is a success story. Like, it's stuck around for 20 years now, 20 plus years now, this side-by-side view. And even Crowden had the top-bottom view only at first. And they realized translators actually, or linguists actually, prefer the side-by-side view now. So they introduced the side-by-side view as well. And it's something you really have to consider when designing tools that are not only used by linguists but by developers as well. You always have to keep in mind both sides. It's
of course the linguists that have the biggest influence, because there's a lot more linguists in the localization industry than any other function.
Well, it's like your former guest said as well, is that linguists look on tools in a different way than developers do. So
How do developers look at tools, you think, and how is that different?
Well, linguists spend a lot more time in that tool. I would say linguists spend a lot more time in crowding than developers actually do. Yeah? Because with developers, it's just basically a deliver files and done, receive files and done relationship.
Plus, developers are interested in like seamless integration in their development workflows and in management, like keeping track of the progress of a localization, or I don't know, in basic QA or automated QA tasks and stuff like that. So it's more like trying to get the localization process from a technical perspective as close as possible into their development environment. But the linguist doesn't really care about how the stuff gets into the tooling. They want to have a very efficient and productive, translation environment. So like your former guest said, you have the buyer's perspective and you have the translator's perspective. And I would say traditionally, or in the very old days, tooling was primarily made from a translator's point of view, how to get stuff done. But when the technology went into the cloud, it was more like embraced by developers, especially by software developers looking to localize software, that there were very many companies like building stuff for themselves and then trying to market it to third parties. And there were just like this amazing tech on how to implement it into development workflows and stuff like that. And then there's the editor. And the editor has some basic functionality. You can type text in, and maybe you have a spell checker or not, or maybe you have to use the mouse for every task you wanna accomplish, or maybe even more basic things, or very non-intuitive buttons, or even bad UI and stuff like that. So this is fine from a standpoint if you have a system where you have volunteers adding, I don't know, 100 words of text or 2 strings of text for your little open source or free app. But it becomes a problem when you really get into bigger projects where professional linguists are part of the team who are looking for productivity, because they're not being paid by the time they spend in the tool. They're being paid by the number of words they can translate or review or proofread or whatever it is. So
yeah, you said the key word there, I think, is intuitive design. And I think it only becomes more important as time passes by. It seems people's attention span is ever growing slimmer. And people are less patient with things. How important is it to do intuitive design for localization tools, and what's the impact, you think?
Well, I would say it is already very important, but it becomes more important every year. Because when I think back, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, our typical cycle time for a software localization update, when a developer had a major release or maybe a minor release, there was so much time for us to do things, because Apple had at least a week in review time, and people would put more features or changes in one update compared to today, that there was more time to do the actual localization part. But this has kind of developed into a kind of continuous localization cycle, where people will do, I don't know, add a very small fix or just like change a feature of the software. So very small and minor tasks, but they're kind of ordered continuously. So translators have to switch context much more often. So instead of working on 1 or 2 bigger projects on a day for, I don't know, 1 or 2 clients, it's like you have 20 strings to translate for this software, and 30 minutes later you switch context into something else. So the tooling has to become less and less like an issue. It needs to be seamless or frictionless. So the more intuitive you build your software, the more productive the translators can be. So I would say it is a very, I mean, it's not like a level of intuitiveness where you would expect like a smartphone app to be, where somebody downloads it, and if people download an app from the App Store, they do not watch onboardings or whatever you're trying to do. It has to be as intuitive, like you open it for the first time and you get it. It's not like that in a professional software tooling, but the focus is more on like there's more features and more stuff to do. You have to kind of access intuitively. So it's more like becoming something where workflows are similar, or the beaten path of workflows on how stuff is being done is kind of still followed. So I would say it is very important, and it becomes even more important, but the definition of what intuitiveness is changes a little bit.
You're in agreement there, Olli?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, at least from what I can tell in our business, Felix is absolutely right. The tool really must not get in the way of translators doing their job quickly, efficiently, and with high quality. So that's something always to keep in mind, because in the end, let's face it, the translator or the linguist actually lives in that software. Yeah, when you have a big project to work on, your typical day is within that software. Yeah, when you're translating away and you're concentrating, and in your tunnel of translating, that's where you're in. So the translator basically spends almost all of his working day in that tool. Of course, he or she wants this tool not to get in the way. It's very important, and that's something I've often seen, like at least 5, 6, 7 years ago, when these cloud-based tools came up, and that's what Felix already said. Like, they've been developed from a standpoint where, like, developers needed a certain fix, yeah, or they had a problem and developed that tool, but they didn't really have the linguist in mind. And we can still see these effects at the moment, where some tools still don't support the linguist workflow in a way that at least some tools did back then, like 10, 15 years ago already, where you, as a linguist, you didn't have to get your hand off the keyboard. Like, why do tools start to force linguists to get their hands off the keyboard and on the mouse again? Because that's a productivity issue that we have. And the more you have to do that within a working day, the less you get done, the less you get paid, or the less the money the company actually makes.
That's an interesting area maybe to explore a little bit more. What do you think are the most common UI, UX mistakes that software companies make that hinder linguist adoption of the software? Are there any flagrant ones that they should be on the lookout for that you have experience with?
Well, at least apart from the issue that I just mentioned, like having to get your hands off the keyboard, it's like the linguist side of the tooling is basically, it's twofold. It has to display information or some information permanently. Yeah, you have to have the source text ready and available permanently. You have to have your target text ready, available permanently. And there is information that only needs to be there temporarily, where you have to, like, concordance search something in the translation memory, or search for a term in the glossary, whatever. And I think that is a challenge to get right as a tool. Yeah, to make sure that these two types of information, like the permanent information a linguist needs and the temporary information that a linguist needs, to get this balance of display correct, yeah, is at least in my opinion, a very big challenge for every tool maker to get right.
Plus accessibility, because translation and freelance translation is very often done by people as a kind of secondary job, or sometimes as a side job or something. So you have people of all sorts and ages in there. So making the software accessible, like, and customizable, like, I don't know, Olli is colorblind, so whenever something is highlighted in red or in green to indicate whatever it is, it's a bad idea, or at least it's a bad idea to not provide an option to kind of change that to whatever other means it is. So I mean, like text sizes, or some people, especially when you localize software and the developer has really put some effort into whatever commenting their strings, or use a specific style of writing their keys in key value based translations, you want to have this really present. And maybe it's important to be able to customize the layout a translator can use a little bit, because somebody is like more focusing on the term basis and other are more focused on the developer comments and stuff. So adding or providing at least a little bit of flexibility in the layout of the UI you're working with would really be beneficial.
I second that. Just as a regular user of software in general, if I can customize something that makes it might not be that impactful for an outside person, but for me, just to be able to turn a program into, say, a dark mode might make a huge difference in the way I perceive interacting with the software. It's funny, it doesn't really change anything per se other than the color, but it might be, I'm very light sensitive in particular, and I like to be able to switch colors. Do you have any wish lists that you could think of that tools don't necessarily provide right now, and that you think it would be really neat if localization tools could provide that, and I'm not seeing it yet?
What Crowden has kind of introduced, and what we're really lucky that it's there, but at the same time there's a lot of more potential for improving, is like being able to communicate on a chat based a platform about specific strings or text parts or paragraphs with not only the project manager, but maybe also the kind of client directly, is really great, because especially in project management, it's like, for example, you have a translation project with, I don't know, 5 languages as target, which is comparably small, but it's fine for the example. Nobody works at the same pace, so it could be that all translators have the same question, but the first translator asked the questions, I don't know, 5 minutes after he accepted the job, because he's the kind of person who kind of scrolls through the whole context and checks and reads in and tries to ask the questions he might have before even starting. You have then other people like kind of finish everything off and then only start asking the questions to fill up the remaining parts when they get answers. So in project management, a big part is like this kind of questions and context information management, because you don't want to ask the client 10 times the same questions, or you don't want to ask one question every hour. You won't want to kind of organize this into a productive way. But then you would have to kind of cache like questions you already asked and to be able to kind of put them together in a kind of information document or whatever it is to spread out to translators. But if you have a kind of a chat-based system, which is kind of visible to all parties involved, or where you would have a kind of means of kind of rights management, is where you could say, okay, all translators can see this, or just a specific group. But whenever you have the ability to directly communicate one to one or one to many to a specific subgroup of people, it gets way more productive, because in this productivity focus translators have, there's a threshold on how important it is to answer the question, to take on the extra time and task and effort to actually ask the question. But if there's just a chat window next to this specific string where you just type in your question, and you as a translator know that the client doesn't see it, but only the project manager, so that you will not even care about spelling or capitalization, because you might think if the client sees it, this might decrease his kind of opinion about your work because you don't care about it, but it's just the chat, right? So this is kind of a great way to not only improve the productivity, but also improve the quality of the final part, because the easier it is to ask questions about a specific part of text, the better.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. We're giving the people at Crowden ideas of how to make the product better. Speaking of Crowden, maybe this is the last question of our podcast this morning. What would be your favorite feature in Crowden? If you had to tell somebody what you really love about Crowden, what's the feature that you would think of first?
So being a translation service provider for developers mainly, yeah. So we're very, very tech savvy, and we're very tech focused as well. And for me, the best part about Crowden, if I had to pick one, yeah, it would certainly be the ability to integrate anything we want. Working with developers, like developers themselves, they are a very special breed. Yeah, let's put it that way. And being able as a language service provider to pick them up where they are in their Git workflow, them being able to just branch out the current version code they are working on, or even simultaneous versions they're working on, and being able to seamlessly get them into Crowden via Git integration, via whatever integration you might think of. It's GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket,
integrations
or whatever.
In general, yeah.
Yeah. That's so great for us and for our clients as developers, like being able to not having to haul around files manually via email, whatever.
Or manually upload and download.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and for us to being able to automatically deliver these files into a working branch, and then create a pull request for the developers to merge into their production branch. I think that's something we really appreciate. It's not only Git integration, but there are other integrations. Like the Figma integration, the Contentful integration, and all this stuff that makes life as a language service provider and for our clients as developers so much easier. And the way Crowden have done it, I think, is plays an important part in there as well.
Yeah, I would like to add something, and I promise to make it quick, but it's like, it's not really a specific feature, but what I really like about Crowden is whenever you have an issue, being like an integration is not working properly, or there's some kind of issue with the editor, Crowden support is exceptional. It's fast. It's like you always get to talk to people who actually know what they're doing. So like the support Crowden gives to actual users is really exceptional.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. I think that ends it perfectly. Thank you, Olli and Felix, for your time today. And
Stefan, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We hope to chat with you sometime again soon. Have a wonderful day back there in Germany. Well, folks, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowden. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to learn more about how leading companies are managing their multilingual content efficiently, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Thank you for tuning in. For more resources on how to streamline your localization process, visit Crowden.com. See you next time.